microphone. Hey everybody, it's Derek here. We're going to take a look at the industry news, video game industry news that is, for the 17th to the 23rd of January 2022. So biggest news this week is obviously Microsoft looking to purchase Activision for $70 billion US. Like we were just talking last week about Take-Two purchasing Zynga and how that was a lot of money, and it was only like the third highest one, and even then this pales in comparison. It's like this is a lot of money. This is like, it's close to what Disney paid for Fox. Like Disney only paid $4 billion for like Star Wars, and Microsoft paying fucking $70 billion for Activision. But okay, anyway, here's like an idea of like the kind of properties they have. And I just kind of find it funny that yes, Activision also owned King at the time, and it's kind of funny to see Candy Crush in the same lineup as the rest of these games. It does not fit the tone in the slightest, but okay. So yeah, Microsoft to purchase Activision. So a lot of websites have been saying that they have been bought. They haven't been bought. It still has to be signed off by the SEC in the US, which will probably rubber stamp it, to be honest. But technically, they haven't bought them yet. It still has to be agreed. There is a legal framework behind it. But then the question obviously comes up is Activision have been going through quite an ordeal for the last while, and the vast majority of the issues can be traced back to its CEO, Big Bobby Kotick, and the fact that the board have not gotten rid of him yet, or he hasn't resigned in disgrace, and so on. And it certainly seems like they were holding on for this golden parachute payout. So it wasn't clear if Bobby was or wasn't being let go, but this quote from Microsoft says, Bobby Kotick will continue to serve as CEO of Activision Blizzard, and he and his team will maintain their focus on driving efforts to further strengthen the company's culture and accelerate business growth, which was later updated. The Wall Street Journal updated to say Kotick is expected to depart the company after the deal is complete. So he will remain CEO up until the time that the deal is finalized. And then Bobby himself said he'd be available as needed. You're not needed, Bobby. You were never needed. You are a parasite on the company. Anyway, $68.7 billion, including net cash, which is what makes up the shortfall, 90, which ends up making it $95 a share, which is kind of ridiculous, but that was also a big drop in Activision's share price. It had gone down quite a bit since the ongoing investigations and the fact that they haven't released a decent game in years. It's a wholesale purchase, meaning Microsoft will get Activision, Blizzard, and King, along with all the many studios they own, and of course ownership of some of the biggest licenses in gaming. So this isn't a question of a partnership or a partial purchase, and that they're just getting Activision or just getting Blizzard. They're getting everything. They've bought the whole thing. There's a bit here about Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella talking about the metaverse and some other bullshit buzzwords, which suggests you should probably let the gaming people talk about the gaming acquisitions, but there you go. And of course, mentioned here in the article is that Microsoft has a huge mess to clean up, company culture wise, and the many lawsuits that are ongoing with Activision. It's a question of, will Microsoft throw their own lawyers into it, or will they settle it, or whatever? Like, they clearly have the money to do it, so who knows. Yeah, so that was the big news, obviously, is that Microsoft have now bought one of the biggest games publishers, and this acquisition, if it goes through, would make Microsoft the third largest video game company in the industry, putting them behind Tencent and Sony. I'm still kind of shocked that Sony is so high up, because they don't have a lot of money. But I guess it is just as a fact, really, that like PlayStation is such a big pillar of video games. I guess that puts them there, and Tencent is backed by like Chinese government, so obviously they have a lot of money. So company workers obviously responded to Microsoft's acquisitions of the ABK Workers Alliance, which is the hopefully union the pseudo union, if you like, because they're not a recognized union yet, but presumably they will be at some point. They have reiterated its commitment to seeking workplace improvements. The news of Activision's acquisition by Microsoft is surprising, but does not change the goals of the ABK Workers Alliance. We remain committed to fighting the workplace improvements and the rights of our employees, regardless of who is financially in control of the company. No, we remain committed to fighting for workplace improvements, not fighting workplace improvements. That seems unlikely of what they would be doing. We will continue to work alongside our allies across the gaming industry to push for measurable change in an industry that desperately needs it. And now, this is the time where I check if my microphone is actually working. Okay, it is. Good. Because last week it wasn't working, and I got pretty far into this update before I realized it. Anyway, the organization reminded people that it had called for Bobby Kotick's dismissal back in November, so this is more like commenting on the fact that he's still going to be there, at least until the deal goes through. And also added that Raven Software is still on strike. So they went on strike a little before Christmas and still going. They have not returned to work. The rest of the article just highlights the actual monies and such associated with it. Then Bobby had an interview, which he rarely gives for obvious reasons, because people just shit on him for good reason when he does. But anyway, as part of the interview, so it was talking about the Microsoft acquisition and all the monies and such and such. But Bobby suggested that the delays of Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 had more of an impact on Activision Blizzard's share price than the ongoing allegations of abuse and harassment against the publisher. It did not. It was very much the ongoing allegations. So the idea here is that Microsoft basically swooped in and offered a deal to purchase Activision Blizzard King, basically because the share price finally dropped to a point where they were comfortable with dropping $70 billion, but okay, if you say so. So what were the reasons for why the share price fell? And Bobby's like, we didn't delay, well, we delayed Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4. Definitely not about the fact that this company sucks. So talking about the delays, both delays were announced during a post-earnings call in early November, and that was followed by a drop in share price of 14%. However, when the first lawsuit was filed by the California department, the price dropped 28%. Double. Sure sounds like that was the reason, Bobby, and not the game delays. But okay. Again, the rest of the article is more or less just talking about some other bullshit he said in the interview, but it's mostly puff pieces and how I'm great. So, who cares? However, Activision employees came back on the receipt of that interview, talking about how Overwatch and Diablo were the reason for the fall in share price and the fact that he basically threw the developers under the bus for his own incompetence. Throwing game devs under the bus rather than taking responsibility for the culture he helped to foster. Hey Bobby, remember when you showed up at our all hands and said there are no expectations for a date, just make it great, because we sure as hell remember. Not a single one of us is going to fall for your gaslighting and continued failure to take responsibility. Jessica Gonzalez, who's former staff and is a founder of ABK Worker Alliance, responded to the article as definitely not being sued by everyone. That wasn't the issue. Definitely not. The fucking balls on this guy. Welcome, new Activision colleagues and friends. While the news is fantastic, I'm excited to see you join the family. I have one thing to say, and it's fuck Bobby Kotick from the bottom of my heart, and so on. The sentiments are more or less the same. It was not the issue that... also, this is a pretty great meme. It was not the issue that the games were delayed. The issue was very much that the company was shit and it had finally come to light. Or not, well... It's not that it had come to light, I guess. It's just that there were, like, evidence now. I think it was always kind of assumed that it was shit. And this mock-up is also pretty funny. Getting a Clippy into WoW. That would be good. I don't know what he'd help you with. It looks like you're trying to log out and play Final Fantasy XIV instead. But I said no. So yeah, big news, but like it's unlikely that the SEC will block Microsoft's acquisition of ABK. Um, just because it doesn't. The only time they would ever really block those kind of things is because of like it might make a monopoly, um, which is why Disney are probably going to come up against that the more acquisitions they make, because there's fewer things for them to purchase and nobody can compete with them anymore. But because this acquisition only makes Microsoft third in the industry, it's unlikely it'll be stopped. The other question, of course, is what happens to, like, Activision is a third party publisher, which means it pretty much puts its games on everything. So it's not, locked to particular consoles. It might have like timed agreements and such with like platform partners, but typically its games end up on pretty much everything. Whereas Microsoft, of course, owns Xbox, which means they would be looking for exclusivity stuff, and they already have done that with Bethesda, like stuff like Starfield, Elder Scrolls 6, whenever it comes out, and so on, will more than likely be locked to Xbox and PC, I guess. So the question is Xbox going to enforce that on Activision? And so far, the messaging has been a bit mixed. PlayStation, for their part, have come out to say that like there are contractual obligations from Activision that say that the games will remain, for PlayStation's part, the games will be coming to PlayStation, but like more technically, that games will remain open and third party, like to every platform, basically. Microsoft have said that they will honor it, but it is not clear if new games will still be subject to that agreement. So it's still not clear. Xbox have said that they are not looking to pull Call of Duty players from PlayStation. But are they looking to pull Diablo players from PlayStation, or Overwatch players, and so on and so forth? They certainly have precedence for it with Bethesda. So I don't see why they wouldn't. Plus, it is entirely within their power to do it now because they don't have those agreements for any new games they would make. Question also would be if like existing IP would also be subject to that. So remembering that Activision bought Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon and so on, which are typically PlayStation IPs, even though technically they don't belong to PlayStation anymore. Would you then end up seeing like Crash on Xbox and only on Xbox and not on PlayStation and that kind of jazz? It's sort of the same idea that what happened with Final Fantasy when Square Enix decided to go with PlayStation instead of Nintendo, and then Final Fantasy for a long time was locked to PlayStation. That would have upset kind of longtime fans, because all the way up from Final Fantasy 1 to 6 would have been on Nintendo platforms, and then from then on to like only recently it kind of went back to Nintendo stuff. So we don't know, basically. We really won't know until the deal goes through. And that is expected to happen in first quarter of 2023, which is actually the end of June for some reason, because I don't know, finance and stocks and bullshit. Who knows? Anyway, moving on. So new releases. There are actually new games out. Like, I'm shocked. Well, I'm not shocked about this one because I knew this was coming out. Well, the other games, I guess, I'm a little shocked about. So, first up, we have Pupperazzi, which I had a look at on the games of 2022, games to look forward to for 2022 that I had. If you want to, there's a VOD of it on Twitch and well, it might actually be gone from Twitch now, but it's over on my YouTube anyway. Basically, it is Pokemon Snap, but dogs. You go around this little area, this town, village, whatever, take pictures of dogs and get them into like different situations or whatever. You might be required from quest givers to find dogs like wearing a funny hat, or certain dogs kept together, or a dog that has its tongue out, and so on. But that's it. It's kind of just a fun time hanging out with dogs and taking their picture and petting them. Of course, the petting is the important part. And I just thought it was really funny that the dogs are basically not animated at all. They're just the models are just moved, and it's just really funny looking. Anyway, that is on PC and Xbox out now. Also, we have Nobody Saves the World, which is from Fight Drink. developer. Fuck, I can't remember the name of their name. Yeah, the name of their name. It's from the guys who made Guacamelee, basically. So this is an action RPG where you play nobody, and they have the ability to basically shapeshift, so they can turn into pretty much anything, and you would use those anythings to either further quests or, you know, change up your abilities and stuff like that. So you have like a big cut here of playing through as different characters, as a rat, as a hammer dude, a monk. There's a ranger back there at some point, guy in an armor, a turtle, an egg somehow. It's questionable how the egg actually moves. It's a pretty funny trailer. Again, also Xbox and PC, so not coming to PlayStation or Switch for now, at least. Maybe later, who knows? But this, I think, is an ID at Xbox thing, so I would think probably later. Rainbow Six Extraction, again, it's from Ubisoft, so I don't want to give them any money, so I probably won't, unless there is like a PlayStation Plus suddenly comes out, or I finally bite the bullet and buy an Xbox and get it on Game Pass, because apparently it's on Game Pass. So Rainbow Six Extraction, skip ahead later a little bit. Rainbow Six Extraction is Left 4 Dead, but with Rainbow Six Siege stuff. So Rainbow Six Siege is a like purely PvP thing. It's 6v6, I think, or 5v5 maybe. And is actually pretty good. It's one of the few actually good Ubisoft games, but Rainbow Six Extraction is PvE. So it's very much a kind of Left 4 Dead thing. You and 2 other people can come in, and you are dealing with an alien infestation. And it's like, you know, kill this many enemies, or collect samples, or retrieve a VIP or something like that. So there's like lots of different quests across a couple of different maps. You've got a lot of different characters to play as. I think they're all characters from Siege, and they've just been adapted to play as PvE instead of PvP. The actual one of the more interesting mechanics is that if you are downed and killed in one of the maps, that character you're playing as is then locked. And if you want to play as that character again, you have to basically go on a mission to rescue them, which I think is pretty cool. It's like it's an incentive for you to play carefully, because a lot of times you might go in and just play whatever, because you know you can just restart and everything will be fine. But no, not this time. Now, if you're not careful, you might lose a character that you really like. It also has a bit of kind of XCOM cooldown kind of stuff, in that if you aren't down but you are heavily injured, or you have to be revived during a level, then your character will be injured for the next level. So if you want to keep playing as them, then you'll end up starting the next level at really low health or very low resources or something like that. So it incentivizes you to rotate characters and not stick to one person. It's an interesting mechanic, but the thing is, it's an Ubisoft game, so fuck them. And we have Windjammers 2. So Windjammers is kind of a resurrection of a very old IP. Windjammers is Frisbee, but with fighting game mechanics, with like supers and counters and stuff like that. It's kind of nuts, a very fast paced and a lot of fun. It's a great party game, basically. And this is from .emu, who are fantastic developers. Like almost every game they've made has been at the very least good, and a lot of them have been excellent. So chances are you're in good hands with these guys if you're looking for a pretty fun party game, or maybe a fun like competitive game. I don't know. I think it's a bit too random to be a competitive game, but it's random enough to be like democratizing for a party game. So I think it'll probably find its feet there. A lot of buzz about it, and it looks really, really nice. But yeah, you need like many people to have a party. You cannot party by yourself. Never party by yourself, kids. And then, of course, last but not least, I can't believe I didn't add this to my games of 2022, but we have My Therapist is a Futanari coming to Steam. Feels like your life isn't going anywhere, like there's some kind of mental block standing in your way. You take the first step towards making an improvement and set up an appointment with a therapist in your local area. After putting it all out there in a safe environment, you soon find yourself engaged in some very unconventional therapy. Immerse yourself in the story by typing your own name. Incredible. Then proceeding to read through a raunchy story from the first person perspective. So it's a visual novel, but I don't know. The title, I was just looking through like what's coming out on Steam, and most of the time I just glaze over because the vast majority of it is crap, but the title was I had to laugh at the title, so whatever, I'm putting it in. Check it out, I guess, if you're interested in that kind of thing. Okay, well, it is now time to talk about the worst parts of video games, the video game industry. So we're sticking with Activision because this has been a very easy source of news for me, at least for this series. Anyway, Bobby Kotick is still trying to hide the scale of Activision's problems. So once again, he is still not trying to take responsibility, or taking responsibility. Never mind trying. So this is basically an accusation that he has been hiding the actual numbers of people who have been fired or disciplined or let go or have left and so on from the company. Wall Street Journal is reporting that not only has Activision Blizzard fired dozens of staff in the last few months, but that Bobby has been hiding that information from the public because, you know, it looks bad and would affect the share price, which means he wouldn't get as big a payout from Microsoft. More than 3 dozen employees have been let go, while around another 40 have been disciplined. It's from an Activision spokesperson, confirmed the numbers. However, she denied a claim by the newspaper sources that 700 reports of misconduct and other issues were filed by staff as part of the company's current internal investigation. 700. So, the Activision spokesperson also disputes that Bobby was intentionally hiding this information. On the other hand, Bobby has been known to hide things that make the company look bad because, remember, he did not inform the board of sexual misconduct allegations that he was aware of, including rape against managers across the company. So he has precedent for hiding things that make him look bad. Who do you believe? This is what the update is. It's basically saying that Bobby was not intentionally hiding these things for any particular reason. Yeah, he was. Anyway. So Raven Software QA team are continuing their strike. They're into the 6th week by the time you read this video. But some good news out of them. The quality assurance testers at Raven Software have announced their intention to form a workers' union. Hooray! Fucking finally. More of this, please. Washington Post mentions that ABK Workers Alliance and the striking QA members at Raven Software are still yet to receive a response to its demands from Activision Blizzard leadership. They're probably too busy thinking how they're going to spend their money. But they have announced their intention to form a union under the Game Workers Alliance in conjunction with the Communication Workers of America, who are an actual union. We ask that Activision Blizzard management respect Raven QA workers by voluntarily recognizing CWA's representation without hesitation. They won't, but whatever. You have to ask them, I guess, and then you go through the actual getting a vote, and then they've already done that. They have their vote for forming a union. The question then is to get the company to recognize it, and if they won't recognize it, you end up in legal things because employees have a legal right to form unions. Game Workers Alliance has its 5 core principles, but they're kind of pretty basic. It's more or less just don't treat people like shit. That's kind of it. Now, brilliant stuff here. Remember now that Bobby was hiding employment numbers, turnover numbers. He did not tell the board of his own company about all of the legal shit that the company is in and is required to by law because it affects pricing and such. Investments, people need to know. Basically, you need to have transparency around company legal stuff so that they can make informed investments in the company or, pull them out, etc. But he didn't do those things. But anyway, Activision Blizzard tells the SEC it's unaware of employee strike. Remember now, the QA team at Raven have been striking for 5 weeks, have reached out to Activision Blizzard leadership to, one, talk about their demands, and two, recognize their union that they've now formed. And Activision's government is like, what strike? We don't know. Activision Blizzard is not aware of any labor strikes or significant legal proceedings against the company. Yeah, not aware of those. No, the 5 of them, I think, at this point. To the knowledge of the company, there are no pending activities or proceedings of any labor union, trade union, works council, or similar labor organization to organize any employees of the company or any of its subsidiaries with regard to their employment with the company or any of its subsidiaries. Yeah, there are many. We've been talking about them for months. So this kind of declaration is part of the Microsoft Activision acquisition, that they have to say the state of the company basically, and anything that might adversely affect the pricing or the deal, or that might adjust the money and such. So they have to say these things. The article reminds reader that Raven Software's QA team are continuing to strike, which I've said. Activision Blizzard staff announced the establishment of a strike fund, so they're also aware of that. And the Communication Workers of America with the intention to lead a company-wide vote on forming a union. So that's the union thing from the last week. And then there are no legal proceedings pending or to the knowledge of the company threatened against the company or any of its subsidiaries, or against any present or former officer or director of the company or any of its subsidiaries in such individual's capacity as such that would have a company material adverse effect. Fucking legalese, Jesus Christ. Anyway, that's basically saying what lawsuits? What many lawsuits that drove the share price down so far that Microsoft were able to just buy us outright? Nope, haven't heard any of those. Yeah, lying to the SEC, lying to a federal agency in the United States. It's this kind of shit that might actually get the SEC to say no to the acquisition. It's this kind of stuff, just lying outright. They don't particularly care about employees or the people, but they do care about money. And this is fucking with the money, so, that might get them done. But I doubt it. Okay, we're going to move away from Activision now. And there was a report came out from Polygon about Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga, but is more specifically, it is about Traveler's Tales itself, the developer. So this is a pretty lengthy report, and it does go into the history of the company and how shit it is to work there. I guess it's a bit more surprising because Traveler's Tales games, the Lego games, is pretty much all they make. Is always seen as a family-friendly kids game fun time thing, and you wouldn't think that they would be subjected to the same problems as every other developer. But also, you need to remember that they are a video game developer, and this is endemic in the industry. So at a time when dozens inside the company were at odds with management is when Traveler's Tales began work on the Skywalker Saga, which was about in 2017. So Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga, for reference, is a combination of all of Lego Star Wars games, plus some games based on the sequel trilogy. So it's pretty much the entirety of Star Wars in Lego. Except for Knights of the Old Republic, because Disney will refuse to acknowledge it, but okay. It's going to be a pretty big game. It's fairly ambitious for them. But dozens inside the company were at odds with management, citing frustrations over tight development schedules, the company's crunch culture, and outdated development tools, which is not surprising because the engine they've been running on is old as fuck. This is interviewing the people there. There was a very soft-spoken blackmail, one former employee says. If people don't start doing overtime, there's going to be problems. Management promised employees a longer development timeline and a new engine. Unfortunately, this did little to improve the situation. Multiple staffers say that management ignored warnings about switching to NTT, which is their new in-house engine. And sorry, it says there a new engine being developed internally, and say that the longer time frame was unsuccessful in alleviating crunch. Big fucking shock there. Former employees say that the company's decision to release new LEGO games annually resulted in a culture of crunch. Big shock. What other games developers have we seen who release games annually have also had accusations of horrible working environments? Hmm. I wonder, is it all of them? Is it every single one that has an annual release has this problem? It's almost like annual releases are bad and video games take longer than that to make. Even if you have teams that swap so that they're not technically making a new game every year, it's more like every 2 years, isn't it? Former founder John Burton, yeah, former founder? No, he would still be founder. He's just former director. That's what it was. Yeah, would often yell at staff to return to their desks if they tried to leave work on time, like contractually. These are my work hours. Goodbye. I'm going home to my family. Fuck you. No, I'm a yell at you because I'm a shithead. Expected employees to put in extra hours unpaid. Leads following employees. Sorry. Others remember leads following employees out of the studio. So you've left. You're ready to go home for the day on your way to the bus or your car or whatever. To question their reasons for leaving and their loyalty to the job. Get fucked. Like imagine your boss. You're waiting at the bus stop to go home, and he comes up to you and is like, "The fuck are you doing here? Go back to work." Fuck off. Highlighted here, and there's a reason I don't use Polygon is because for some reason my highlight thing doesn't always work, so I sometimes miss important details. But I did remember this paragraph. A big problem was that crunch was premeditated, in that it wasn't a case of it's an emergency. We have to reach a deadline and we have a shit ton of work to do. So sorry, but we're gonna have to crunch, and it's my fault. And big saws about that, and we'll do better next time. No, it was. This is it. We're gonna crunch. It's not even. You can't even call it crunch because this is just how we work. This is work. Work is fucking 100-hour work weeks. Anyway. It was a regular occurrence because of the type of games we made, movie tie-ins and kids stocking fillers. They all had deadlines dictated by a holiday event or the release of some film, so it wasn't a case that they could just push back the release date for some of these because they had to come out with the film. Which is another reason why licensed games, typically, games based on films or games based on anything that has to come out around the time of something else, almost always shit. Almost like, with some very few exceptions. Spider-Man 2, maybe. But with some very few exceptions, they're almost all terrible. And it's because they have such a small development window, and the thing that they are coming out in conjunction with is usually much quicker to make. Like a film is much faster to make than a video game by like years. But the game is almost always considered a subsidiary to the video game or to the film. Like the film's the big thing, and the game is just a whatever, like promotional thing. So they don't think that we need quite a bit more lead-in time for the game than the film. You know, you can get a film turned around in like a month, 2 months, maybe, depending on the size of the film. You know, that's what I mean, like shooting it, not like storyboarding and development and all that. That obviously takes a bit more time, but it does not take like 5 years. It doesn't take that much time. Anyway, Warner Bros. Eventually buy Traveler's Tales. Warner Bros. Aren't great. Like they don't come up too often in the series because they kind of keep their head down. But they're also a shit publisher. But when Warner Bros. Bought them, they held a company-wide satisfaction survey to determine what people thought of like the working conditions there and things they could show. It's basically to get a lay of the land from the employees instead of from the founders. And the results were the lowest ratings Warner Bros. Had ever received at the time. That's from any of their acquisitions or any of their developing companies. John, this is the co-founder, told us he was going to hit the reset button in response to the survey results and try to start fresh. He started by dropping some of the odd rules we had at the studio, disabling the internet firewall, allowing people to actually answer their phone, but nothing meaningful that addressed project timelines, low salaries, or the crunch culture. It was back to business as usual the following Monday. So that was more or less give the couple of crumbs to placate them, and it did not. It did not placate them in the slightest. They reached out to John about that, but he gave them a pretty standard "I'm under NDA, so go away." Low morale at the company. 12 former employees say the conditions failed to improve after Burton's move. So this is when Warner Brothers bought Traveler's Tales, and he eventually moved somewhere else. With studio manager David Dootson and his successor, studio manager director Paul Flanagan. So these are two people who would have taken over for John Burton afterwards, maintaining an atmosphere where overtime was expected. So, like, change in management, but not change in management. Overtimes at Traveler's Tales games was split between two types for every employee: flexi time and overtime. Flexi time had a 40-hour cap. This meant that employees could hit the limit and not get any benefit for hours they were putting in beyond it. Unpaid overtime. Slavery. Anyway, employees were warned about consequences if they didn't pull their weight, and told they were letting others down if they chose not to work. So that is a pretty textbook getting people to crunch thing. Is the rest of the team are doing it. They're being held back because you're not, your work isn't available for them to work on. Like, you have, let's say the artist doesn't want to do overtime for very good reasons, but the developer on the other end is willing to do overtime because he's been harassed into it, or I don't know, maybe he needs the money, whatever. The point is, he doesn't have the art to work on when he's doing his overtime. So they would use that as a you're holding him back. He'd also do it as a kind of everyone else is doing it. Do you want them to also be super tired just like you? Maybe if you help them, they won't have to do as much overtime and that kind of shit. Not, hey, I fucked up as a manager and now we're all in a terrible situation, except me. I'm going home. But the rest of you, no. You're staying here to work. It was not uncommon to work 80 to 100 hours in 6 days a week. The typical work week is 40 hours, 5 days a week. They're putting in 80 to 100 6 days a week. One extra day would only be 48 hours, typically. They're doing double. And a lot of it is unpaid, by the sounds of it, too. Contractors who were told about full-time employment opportunities and asked to prove themselves. This is, again, another way to get people in. It's like, hey, we'll dangle a full-time employment job over your head. We're never going to give it to you, but I keep telling you you're going to do it. So they would do overtime. Again, very typical. Hey, kids, if you're out there and you're starting a new job, or, just getting into your career or whatever, if you ever have a contract position and they dangle a full-time employment opportunity over your head, leave. That you're not getting it. Okay. Now we're moving on to QA, and hey, QA are treated like shit most of the time. In, like, not even just in video game development, in software development in general, QA are kind of treated like shit. Not everywhere, sure, but most places. Most places there are. So this is from the QA people. Working conditions at that studio were among the worst they had ever experienced in the games industry, with crunch and bullying between staff being commonplace. QA was treated as less than the development team and kept separate from other departments. QA staffers weren't allowed to access other floors, which led to the issue that this had the consequence of preventing QA from visiting HR. That's a good consequence you got there. Yeah, can't speak up about it. Guess everything's fine in QA. So no one's coming to HR. Oh, they're not allowed to visit that floor. Well, hey, meet up for lunch or something. I don't know. It also made it difficult for programmers to contact specific QA testers. So it's very important that developers be able to speak to QA. Like, there has to be a very robust back and forth between them, because their jobs are very, very tightly coupled. It's like, I make the thing. You test the thing. You found a problem with the thing? Tell me what the problem is. You can't because you can't visit me? How am I supposed to fucking fix anything? You can send your ticket through whatever ticketing system they have and they can, like, type it out, but it's always, if you have a lot of bugs, you don't always put the same amount of time into typing out what's like a problem, because you have like 500 other bugs that you need to write tickets for. So you're going to be a bit short about what the issue is. And like most of the time, it's fine. It's usually just, here are the steps to reproduce it, and the developer will just see the bug. It'll be like plainly obvious to them. It'll be, oh, right, yeah, okay, that's a problem. But not all the time. Sometimes you need follow-up information. and you need to contact the specific person who found the bug because either there's not sufficient enough text, or you're not sure what the bug is, or whatever other reason, like they did it on a specific piece of hardware that you don't have access to, something like that. Either way, you need to talk to QA. Not being able to talk to them is a big problem. A common refrain about changing the company culture and so on was we'll just do it for this game and then we'll do it differently next time. And obviously they just kept saying that. It's like, I'll do it tomorrow. It's like, you never do it, because tomorrow never arrives. It's always today. And then, of course, not to be outdone, they have, of course, the other familiar problems at video game developers is that female staff are also treated like shit. So female staff being subjected to bullying, comments about their appearance, and withheld promotions and contracts. They're also paid less. There is a gender pay gap. Gender pay gap across the industry, really. Across almost every industry. But anyway, women were paid less than their male counterparts on average and held significantly fewer senior roles. There's a few stat breakdowns, but basically there's pretty much no women in any management positions in Traveler's Tales. There's maybe one. This is Unreal Expectations, so there's a somewhat of a pun in this title because it's about the game engine also. But anyway, this is why has the Skywalker Saga taken so long to come out? So 2017 it was announced, and it's still not out. It'll be out this year, maybe at some point. I think they just released a release date, announced a release date, and I think is what spurred Polygon to release their report. Anyway, around the time the project kicked off, management made the very unpopular decision to develop the game on a new engine called NTT, which is their new Traveler's Tales. I don't know. The TT is probably Traveler's Tales. I just don't know what the N is. Engine, maybe. Spelled really, really badly. I don't know, but it's management made the unpopular decision. Management, not development. Management made that decision. Because in this article, or in this paragraph rather, that I was not able to highlight, thanks again Polygon for arbitrary, some of them can be highlighted, some of them can't. Employees inside the studio were like, let's just fucking use Unreal. Like, everybody's using it. It's heavily documented. We can ask people anonymously online. Like, there are a ton of development, like forums and boards where you're like, I'm having this problem. And you can either find someone who already has that problem and has a very well documented way to fix it, or you can find tons and tons of developers who are more than happy to help. That's kind of the whole. That's like one of the good parts of having a developer community, is that for the vast majority of them, we're very happy to help. Anyway, if you make a completely bespoke, entirely internal engine, the only people who will be able to help you is yourself. Because no one else will have encountered this problem before. It will just be you and whoever made the engine. And guess what? You can be smart enough to create something, but you're not necessarily smart enough to fix it when it's broken. These are problems. One other issue that they were going to have, of course, was that NTT is a brand new engine, so they haven't ironed out all the problems with it. And in fact, by the sounds of it, there are a great many problems, but also Traveler's Tales games or the Lego games appear on pretty much every single platform. That's a lot of platforms to develop for. Platforms themselves have very particular things that they do, and will have to have specific fixes in place to make them run. And again, something else that Unreal has already done. It's a very well-established engine. Almost every development studio uses it. Sorry, that's not true. But a considerable chunk of the video game industry uses the Unreal Engine. Which means it knows how to deploy for PlayStation, how to deploy for Xbox, how to deploy for Nintendo Switch, and so on. Whereas this new engine will not know any of those things. Everyone was like, we have new programmers, why are we not using this technology? Which is Unreal Engine. We have all this crazy technology. Unreal is charging lower fees than ever before on their stuff, and people know how to use it. Why are we not using it instead of creating something that is unfinished and being forced into production as is going to give really terrible final results? So yes, from the development side of things, it was like, we've got a bunch of new developers coming in who've only ever developed on Unreal. If we have to teach them how to work this engine that I also do not know how to work, we're gonna have a bad time. Why are you doing this? Particularly on a extremely high profile, our most ambitious project we've done. like it's the Star Wars license. This is a mistake, but hey, wouldn't you know it? Management fucking forced it through anyway. Um, yeah, so a lot of this is just like big problems with the new engine, and that stuff that used to take them like a minute now takes them 10. It's that kind of thing. Some of this then is them taking their concerns and the low morale and so on, and they took it to studio heads and stuff like that. Finally, I guess something broke them. Oh, sorry. Yes, it is. It's the new engine is what broke them. Someone communicated to Tom that the mood inside the studio wasn't great. So Tom got half of the studio into one meeting and half the studio into a second meeting, and split the people off into groups so they could talk about what they liked and disliked about the studio. And at the end of the day, you see this huge list of terrible things and this tiny crop of good things on the left. And he's gotten this feedback from multiple groups, so like double blind testing and so on, I guess. Point is, people hate working in this company. A statement here from Stone is a bit rose-tinted glasses about that whole situation. He was having those meetings and he didn't want people to just say, I hate this, I hate that, I hate whatever. He wanted people to say, this is why I like working here, and so on. Basically, he wanted to be able to put his head in the sand, and his employees were not letting him do that. Maybe you should think about that. So this part of the article is basically almost all about the Skywalker saga itself. Management coined the phrase "strive for 85" to refer to the game's potential Metacritic score. So Metacritic has been an absolute fucking bane for developers since it was like launched, or since it became popular, we'll say, because they tie Metacritic scores to like salaries and bonuses and shit like that. So they think it's some kind of mythical, if we hit 85 we'll make $100 billion, and it doesn't work that way. The number fluctuates so much and is subject to so many things outside of your control. The idea that the development team in its entirety could do anything about that is ridiculous. A lot of that score is just marketing, really. Anyway, doing this shit required staff to be in and out of overtime for years to achieve the company's ambitions. I bet company directors did not do their overtime, but there you go. One other issue on why Skywalker Saga has been delayed so much is that staff were moved around on projects because for whatever reason, Traveler's Tales decided that while they were working on their absolute biggest project to date by like miles, hey, let's take on new projects. Let's make other things while we're doing this and take people off the game and move them somewhere else. Speaking from a development and software developer standpoint, being moved around projects is not great. You lose a lot of the knowledge that you had built up over that time because you need to make room for this new project. Basically, you can only hold so much in your head at once. And when you're working on one project, you can keep all of the project knowledge, or as most of it as you can, in your head. You have that knowledge. If people ask you questions about it, you can answer them, and help other developers who are working on the same project who may not be working in the same part, but they're working on something similar, and there's interoperability in software like all over the place. Being moved around projects means you pretty much have to wipe that so that you can get up to speed on this new project. And if you're moved back and forth and all over the place, you're going to lose a lot of that knowledge. And more importantly, the people who are still working on that project have now lost that resource as well. It's bad. It is a bad idea to move developers around projects against their will. Like if they want to leave the project, sure. Like if they're not happy there, absolutely. If you can accommodate them, do. But if they're happy to stay on that project, you really shouldn't move them around. If you can avoid it, it's bad. It's taking a resource away from that project is already a bad issue, but it's going to take them time to get up to speed on the new project. And then if they get moved back to the old project, they will have to then acclimate to all of the changes from that project because it didn't stay not doing anything. So yes, that's also a big problem in software development, is that people get moved around a lot. This is a big change in management, so Warner Brothers would have appointed Michael Denny, formerly of Sony, became studio head of Traveler's Tales, and he changed a bunch of shit, basically. He did get rid of some people. He got rid of Parsons and Flanagan, who were, pretty much doing business as usual with the crunch stuff. But one other thing he did is that he got rid of a group that had originally been set up to future-proof the studio should it ever lose the Lego license, but has now been retooled into focusing exclusively on Lego. This concerned staffers, that's because they have become aware of Lego's interest in working with other studios. So there are a bunch of other Lego titles out there that are not made by Traveler's Tales. So it would suggest that Lego are fatigued by Traveler's Tales, or they're looking for cheaper alternatives, or maybe they just want different. They just want something different, and it isn't the Traveler's Tales Legos. I don't know, for whatever reason. But also, he hired. Right, yes. Chief among these is hiring his former Sony colleagues Eric Matthews and Mark Green as directors of game development, head of game. This was controversial inside Traveler's Tales as the roles weren't widely advertised within the company. Nice jobs for the boys. Love me a bit of nepotism. It is excellent. Current and former Traveler's Tales staff also see parallels between what is happening at Traveler's Tales and what happened at Sony Manchester, which is where Matthews and Green, the jobs for the boys lads, used to work. And they micromanaged all aspects of design, and subsequently Sony Manchester was shuttered. And the same shit is now happening at Traveler's Tales. Somebody has not learned their lesson. Why? Because they were not punished for that lesson. But anyway, it's a pretty lengthy report, and it goes into a lot more detail than I have there. So if you're interested, do check it out. Somewhat mixed feelings about actually buying the Skywalker saga now after having learned all of that shit. Like, there are some changes in that, like, the former people who were like crunch are gone. Warner Brothers are a bit more aware of it. On the other hand, it's 2007 when they became aware of it. It sounds like it's still happening, so who knows? Okay, going back to a story we did last week. So this was the Troy Baker thing where he announced his partnership with Voiceverse NFT shit. Which was super shady, and it didn't seem like it was actually conducive to a good industry for his own industry. Like, if this thing ever became popular, it would put voice actors himself out of work. Like, what the fuck are you doing, Troy? But other than that, it just looked super shady on, like, who's paying royalties. Are there going to be royalties? Like, who owns the rights to any new voice work? Because sure, you can own the rights to my voice. That doesn't sound right. But hey, even after all that, turns out they were stealing other people's work and passing it off as their own, because that's really what NFTs are anyway. Voiceverse NFT admitted to using voice lines created by non-commercial rival. Even better, it was a non-commercial one. That's like using Creative Commons and having people pay for it. That's a big no-no. So the announcement received a universally negative response. This is when Troy was like the hater create thing from last week, which was bad move. So they there's a bunch of now deleted tweets from Voiceverse, which they were like boasting about the technology they could use and how they could use it to like voice a cartoon character without having to like get an actual voice actor in. They could just use this AI to do it. But it was in fact created using 15.ai, a popular non-commercial text-to-speech service. Unlike Voiceverse, 15AI is free to use and play around with. So yes, they're stealing free shit, passing it off as their own, and selling it using cryptocurrency. This is from the creator of 15.ai. Voiceverse are actively attempting to appropriate my work for their own benefit. Yeah, it's the NFT way. Should we be surprised at this point? Voiceverse NFT later replied, admitting it had used it while apologizing for its use without giving proper credit. There isn't a question of credit here. You are stealing free shit and then trying to get people to pay for it. This isn't an issue of credit. This is a big ethical problem here. And then the rest of this part is just that Troy Baker did try to walk back his more aggressive stance on the NFT stuff, but did not wholly remove himself from Voiceverse. So it's not clear if he's still endorsing them or if his voice will be part of the thing. But it sounds like there is no thing because they're just stealing somebody else's work, trying to pass it off as their own. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that an NFT outfit would try to steal somebody else's work and pass it off as their own without paying the original person. I'm shocked. Okay, we'll finish off with some dumb shit. Or dumb stuff rather. God of War out on PC, which means God of War mods. So there are some pretty horrible ones, like this one of Kratos with giant eyes and a big mouth. That is pretty terrifying. I don't know why these mods are all like give Kratos ridiculous proportions, but that's what they all are. Here's big head Kratos. Fucking ridiculous. Does he actually do the whole fight like this as well? Brilliant. Anyway, I guess spoilers for God of War. Here's Kratos, who when he is just a giant eyeball, because why not? And Kratos with giant arms. Why all of these are just give Kratos ridiculous proportions? Why are they the mods anyway? I imagine since it's only just come out, there will probably be like a bunch of other mods to come out later on that people can work on. These ones where you just fuck about with the game model are obviously quick enough to make. I'd say check back for some even stupider mods later on. And then even better, Final Fantasy VII porn interrupts government meeting. So brilliant. Italian lawmakers were subjected to Final Fantasy VII's Tifa having sex in the middle of the digital proceedings. So this is during a Zoom meeting. Somebody shared their screen, and it was Rule 34 Tifa porn. They were introducing Giorgio Parisi, one of last year's Nobel Prize winning physicists. And it was like, here's Giorgio Parisi, and it's Tifa getting railed. It was hijacked by someone sharing their screen. Debatable if it was hijacked and if it was just somebody shared their screen and they happened to be watching porn at the time. If you want to see the video, you can go find this Twitter timeline, and it's there. And anyway, people were talking about like during the meeting. It was up for like a good minute. Anyway, the presenter sighs loudly and works with their assistant to try and kill the shared feed, which ends up taking forever. Somehow it takes even longer to kill the audio, so they had got the video down. You could still hear the sex going on in the back, which is brilliant. Anyway, and this comment was pretty. Oh my god, it's disgusting. Tifa, where did he post this? There's so many of them. Which ones in particular? Of course, whatever you're into. I mean, it was a pretty good video. Anyway, all right, we'll go with Pupperazzi to play us out, I guess. To start, that's what I wanted. Anyway, that was the news for. Why aren't you going full screen? Full screen. Fuck you. All right. Anyway, that was the news for 17th to 22nd January 2022. Obviously, the biggest news was Microsoft's intention to purchase Activision for $70 billion ish, give or take $1 million. That's like it's pretty big. That's a pretty big change. Mostly because it gets rid of Bobby, hopefully. But the idea that he's the completely the only issue at Activision is wrong. He's like a big problem, but he's not the only problem. As is evidence from the fact that the board wouldn't remove him. You know, there's clearly much bigger problems at that company. But even at that, it might see the resurrection of other IPs. There's been talk of like Guitar Hero because Activision were cheap and didn't want to actually invest in the hardware. Same for the Skylander stuff, which was like the Disney Infinity knockoff thing. or was Disney Infinity a knockoff of Skylanders? I forget which one came first, but that was like the Toys to Life thing where you could buy like a model of a ship and connect it like NFC scan to the thing, and you could then play as it in the game. That thing was obviously a lot of hardware, and Activision were either uninterested or unwilling in getting into the hardware game. Same for like making the guitar peripherals for Guitar Hero; they just weren't interested in doing it anymore. Whereas Microsoft already have a hardware pipeline for this kind of thing, or not for that kind of thing specifically, but they have like hardware partners and shit, so they could potentially make that a little bit easier. Debatable if they will, but there's a bunch of like IPs that Activision have been sitting on, Activision Blizzard King have been sitting on, that could potentially get resurrected with Microsoft. They could, since they now have access to an even bigger pool of developers. Now, it's not just who they've gotten with Activision, but they themselves, Microsoft, Xbox, have tons of other development studios that they could be like, hey, want to work on a new Tenchu? And be like, yes. They could give that, they could do that kind of stuff. Could be interesting. Unsurprising that Activision are also trying to downplay a bunch of stuff so that they can make sure that deal goes through. Whether it'll be successful about it, to know. Raven Software getting the QA team to unionize. Awesome. More of that, please. And Tifa porn is obviously always a great day to end the week. But other than that, elsewhere on the channel, I have started streaming a lot more. So I have now streamed like a couple of my 4-bit games. So I've done Solar Ash, which should be out today at some point, unless you're watching this as a VOD, in which case it came out yesterday. So I streamed that on Saturday. I've also streamed Metroid Dread and a Necromunda Hired Gun. So that was all this week. Planning on doing something similar next week. I am looking for like a long-term game that I can play, like rather than just doing one-shots of games and changing the game. But I would also like to do one game where I play start to finish, and preferably something kind of big, because the stream's length kind of lends itself to a game that for long gaming sessions. So I guess I'm thinking something like that. I was thinking like Monster Hunter or Neo, but one Neo's hard, and I'm not sure if I want to subject stream to rage or not. And Monster Hunter is an online game, and I don't know if I can both stream and play an online game at the same time. Internet may not handle it too well, so I don't know. But if you have any suggestions, do let me know, and I'll see if I can accommodate that. Alan Wake will be continuing. That will be continuing to be a pre-recorded LP. Those won't be changing. I'll be doing more pre-recorded videos as we continue, because I'm not always up for streaming, but I am, still playing video games. So I'll be continuing to do that. Anyway, let me know what you thought of today's video or any video that's gone up. You can find me under my face. All of those links, you can find me there. Drop comments or tweets or whatever. And if you have any links to any more Tifa porn, just DM me. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.